All right, it is 5 o'clock on the West Coast, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. We have a special time today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It is time to take your pitch to the next level. It's week 3, y'all. I am so excited with how this class has been turning out. The feedback I've been getting from all of you has been fantastic. It feels like a lot of you who took the first round of classes are really getting a lot from the second round and are able to grow your pitching skills at a really rapid rate. So I'm stoked with the progress you're making. I'm really excited about this week's episode, this week's class that we're going to go over. We're going to dig into a lot of uncomfortable stuff about the pitch process that oftentimes kind of sucks. But before we jump into that, let me introduce myself. My name is Carlo Gonzalez-Moss. I'm the CEO of a company called Moranti Media. We specialize in all things pitching. That means pitch decks, lookbooks, in-room presentations, pitch coaching, all of the above. You might have met me at the Catalyst Festival last year if you were there. You might have been taking my class online on the Catalyst sites over the past year. We are back. We are 3 weeks in. This is taking your pitch to the next level. If you are interested, this is always the place where I put my cheap plug, http://moranti.com. Hit us up. Like I said, we do pitch decks, we do pitch coaching. If you are building a pitch or you want to learn more about pitching, that is what we specialize in. That is our whole focus. Reach out to me there, or you can hit me up on social media at Carlo Moss across all social media platforms. I'm really excited. I'm stoked that y'all are joining me today. We had to change the times. So hopefully we might get a few more people in here because we were rocking a little bit later. But before we dig into anything new, as always, let's review last week. Let's look at what we talked about. So last week was all about the differences between a good pitch and a great pitch. And we spoke specifically about what defines a great pitch. We went over a lot of different topics. The things that we identified that really define a great pitch are, number one, preparation. Getting to know your show inside and out. And along with that, the other part of preparation is rehearsal. The point that I hammer more than any other is keep on practicing your pitch until you're blue in the face, till you hate it. Keep doing it some more until you stop hating it, and then keep doing it until you hate it again. So preparation, number one thing that defines a great pitch. Number two, focus. Making sure that everything that's in your pitch is tracking along the right lines, is keeping the focus on the show that you are ultimately selling. Then we talked about performance. We talked about making sure that the excitement that you have for your project is conveyed through everything in you, through the way that you speak, through the way that you show your images, through every aspect. The excitement that you have for your show is apparent and clear. We also talked about in that performance, you need to be a good storyteller. You're really telling a story to your potential buyers and trying to activate their imagination. You want them to get on board. So that was a key part of the performance, is the storytelling. And we talked about the fact that you just need to be genuine. You need to be upfront and real with the people that you're pitching to. And that genuineness and that authenticity comes through in a huge way when you're pitching. And we talked about being able to create comfort in the room, being able to be that person that says, yeah, this is my show. Hand me the ball. I can take it and run with it. Don't worry, it's kind of a weird experience. Y'all are going to be fine. I've got this. That conveys so much across the board when you're a creator, that you have got this from every perspective. That's the type of person that I want to work with. That's the type of person that an executive is going to say, we can give that person a bunch of money and they're not going to fuck it up. Lastly, we talked about managing your expectations. We talked about the fact that this is really an odds game. You know, that we use the example of the executive is sitting there with actually a little bag of gold coins. They have 6 or 7 gold coins that they get to distribute throughout the year and say, you get to have your life changed. You get to have your life changed. Here's a bunch of money. Go make a show. And recognizing that a lot of things in the pitch process are out of our control. So ultimately, it's incumbent upon us to focus on the things that we can control. Our performance, the way that we're laying out our story, everything about our pitch that's within our realm of control, those are the things to focus on, because there are way too many things that are out of our control. So all of that to say that those are the things that make the difference between a good pitch and a great pitch. This class is all about taking your pitch to the next level. This is for people who have had experience pitching, who have been in rooms, who know what that pitch process is, but want to get better, want to grow, want to become an expert at the pitch process. So with that in mind, building off of that idea of managed expectations, let's talk about our topic this week, the stuff that sometimes kind of sucks. So for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about the stuff that sometimes kind of sucks about pitching. We're building off of that last point of managed expectations. I want to address 4 main topics, 2 this week, 2 next week, that deal with kind of the bummer side of pitching. And these are things that you're going to have to deal with and get acquainted with if you're going to be able to pitch regularly and find success in the pitch room. So this week, we're going to be talking about receiving notes, and we're going to talk about adjustments, when to make them and when not to make them. Then next week, we're going to handle the other side of the bummer coin, which is how to handle rejection and why your pitch isn't selling. So let me talk a little bit about the background of why we're talking about this stuff right now. I wanted to dive into this topic this week and next week because I'm right in the middle of experiencing some of these things right now. And I want to give you a firsthand account of what it's like to go through this and work through these difficult feelings and these tougher aspects of pitching. As I mentioned on here before, over the past few months, I've been pitching a lot on a bunch of different projects, both as a producer and as a writer. And I'm going to be upfront with you guys. I don't have there's not a lot of bullshit in me. So I'm just going to be upfront and honest. This week, I got some bad news. I've been out there pitching. I had one project that I was really stoked about that I thought really was one of my best pitches ever and really had a chance to sell. Took it out to a bunch of networks. Well, got the word this week that every network passed. Swing and a miss on all of them. And that sucks. Nobody likes to hear that. Had big expectations built up, and ultimately they didn't come through. But I want to go through this process with y'all in real time to help you understand, A, how common this situation is, and B, how you can process it and use it to grow. For me, obviously I pitch for a living. I teach pitching. I know that I'm all right at this, So for me to go in, pitch, and ultimately fail is just an example to you of how common it is and how you have to get used to the fact that you're going to get rejected. You're not going to sell shows every time out. It's the batting average analogy, right? In baseball, if you get a hit 3 out of every 10 times, you succeed 3 out of every 10 times. Congratulations, you're a Hall of Famer. That's very similar to the world of pitching. Although I would say if you succeed 1 out of 10 times, you're probably a Hall of Famer and a millionaire. So that's something to get used to is there's rejection in this. It sucks, but there's ways for us to work with this. So what I want to talk about today, we're going to dig into the nitty gritty of rejection and pitches not selling next week. But before we do that, I want to talk about, the elements of pitching that kind of come before that rejection that are equally as difficult and can be equally as crushing to the ego. And that's receiving notes. Receiving notes is absolutely a skill set unto itself. It's like a sub skill set of pitching and writing. And if you're good at getting notes, you are going to be so far ahead of so many other people in this industry because so many people in our industry, let's be real here, have giant egos. And if you tell them their thing isn't perfect, they're going to freak out. They're not going to be able to handle it. They're either going to take it personally, they're going to shut down, or they're not going to use it constructively when ultimately the person giving them the notes is probably coming from a place where they can help. So let's dig into this idea of receiving notes. So throughout the pitch process, you are going to receive so many notes, all kinds of notes from every which way. It's very rare and definitely not advisable to go into a pitch completely blind without having anybody else look at it. That's a complete recipe for disaster. You want to kind of road test your pitch. You want other people to look at it and see and, tell you if it's working or not, or what's not working and how you can adjust that. Now, depending on how your project is set up, there are probably going to be multiple layers of executives, consultants, and colleagues who are going to give you their thoughts on the pitch. And it's up to you to determine which of those notes you're going to take and which of those you're going to leave by the wayside. which of those you're going to internalize and beat yourself up about, which of those you're going to go, oh, I didn't think of that. That makes my pitch better. So in the first phase of our class last year, we talked about everything that goes into building a pitch from scratch, right? Like that class was all about walking through the pitch structure and going, here's how you build your characters, here's how you build your episodes, all that nitty gritty. So I'm going to assume that you've already done that for your show. You got a pitch that you feel ready to go with, and we're now at the point where you're ready to put it up in front of others. So first, let's talk about the people who are going to be giving you notes. So like I said, you're going to be getting notes from every which way. Who's going to be giving you those notes? The first person that you're probably going to get notes from, aside from yourself staring at the mirror telling you how terrible you are, is one of your reps, either a manager or an agent. So when you pitch them, it's probably going to be looser, and you can come in with something that's still in process. You might even go and sit on their couch and be like, I got this idea that I'm noodling around. Tell me what you think of it. But when you share your project and you pitch with them, it's as much about equipping them as it is selling them on the idea, right? This is where this form of your pitch is going to be a little bit different from every other form. Because ideally, when you're pitching your reps, it's going to spark all kinds of ideas in them about what the next steps for the project should be. Do they want to attach a name? Do they want to go out to a studio, maybe attach a showrunner, or maybe even go directly out to network because they feel like it's ready to go? And that's where having a good rep on your side, a good manager and a good agent. I feel like we should just start referring to managers and agents instead of calling them reps. Let's just call them magents. But yeah, that's where having a good magent on your side is going to be invaluable, because ultimately, like, one of the things that I always encourage people is figure out what you do well, and then surround yourself with people who do their thing well. And if you have an agent or a manager who's great at what they do, when you go in and you pitch them your idea, that's going to start sparking their creativity. And their brain works in a different way than yours. Your creativity might spark onto a story. It might spark onto, a run of dialogue, some way that you can fashion a script. Whereas an agent or a manager, they're equally creative, but in a different way. Their brain's going to start thinking, oh, you know who'd be a great showrunner for this? Oh, you know who's buying right now? This would be a perfect place to set up here. I have a great relationship with this person. All of a sudden, ideas start popping in their head. Their creativity gets sparked. It's one of the things that we talk about all the time in every kind of fashion in this class, is sparking the other person's creativity, getting their imagination going. And so that's part of what the pitch to an agent or a manager is, sparking ideas in them. So they're going to be thinking all these different ideas. Should we attach a name? Do we go out to a studio? What are we going to do? You want them thinking in that way. At the same time, they have a much better sense than you do of what the lay of the land is with the industry. So they're also going to give you notes on the pitch on what they think needs to be improved and or what needs to be adjusted to best position this project in the market. Then from there, your rep is also going to give you notes on each of your pitches based on the feedback they get or what they see if they're in the room with you. So there's kind of two layers of notes that you're going to get from your reps. It's that initial layer of notes where they might also be, kind of working with you on the pitch, helping you to like really build the pitch, depending on how familiar they are with the pitch process, if that's really their wheelhouse. Like my manager, for example, is awesome when it comes to building a pitch. My two managers, I always am going to get their eyes on things first, because I almost want to build it collaboratively with them. I'm going to take a rough skeleton into them, pitch it to them a little bit, and then we're going to work together to kind of build it out, because I know how good they are at identifying what works and doesn't work in a pitch. Then the other side of the coin is they're also going to give you notes based on the feedback that you get when you start pitching, because in all likelihood, they're going to be the line of communication. If you're pitching to a studio, they're going to be the ones getting feedback from the studio, or they're going to be in the room with you, introducing you, hyping you up, and they're going to be able to see what's happening in the pitch and being able to read the other people in the room or on the Zoom, right? Like if you have an agent or a manager with you on the Zoom, they're going to be sitting there scanning all the faces, trying to see, oh, did they laugh at that joke? How do they feel about that? Ooh, they got uncomfortable at this part. Let's rework this part. I can see a little bit of tension in that, right? They're going to be observing that so that they can give you some notes on that. So your reps are going to give you notes. That's the first group of people that are going to be giving you notes. Second group of people, let's say your rep goes in and they say, great, let's go pitch some studios. Let's go pitch some production companies to create a more attractive package. You know, like you might be in a place where you as a writer can't necessarily sell a show on your own yet, just on name value alone. So they're going to connect you with a studio or a production house, or even like, you know, an independent producer who has a little bit more of a reputation at a network, might have a little bit more cachet, or just have experience producing stuff to make a network feel more comfortable. So we're going to get into the how and why of this whole situation and how these attachments happen and why they're important in a later class. But for now, just know this is extremely common. When I was an exec, this was something that I did all the time. You know, I connected with a lot of agency managers saying like, hey, we got this project. Do you have a writer for it? And vice versa. I would get projects sent to me, and we as the studio be like, well, here's the attractiveness of our package. We can offer, you know, animation services. We can do this. We have a reputation. And then you find this perfect marriage between creator and studio. So let's say you go in, you pitch a production company or a studio, which I'm going to use those phrases fairly interchangeably. Let's create a fake production company called Jimmy's Production House. So right next to Disney is Jimmy's Production House, right? Number 1 and number 2 right there. So you go in and you pitch Jimmy's Production House, and they love it. They tell you, we're going to give you a little bit of money. We're going to option the property. Or they're going to set up a shopping agreement. Option means, you know, they have a chunk of the ownership. Shopping agreement is basically like, we don't want to give you any money, but let's make a deal that we're going to work together to try to sell this, and we all make money in the back end. All right. So you go into Jimmy's Production House, you kill it on the pitch to them, and they're like, let's be partners. Let's do something together. So now the plan is you're all going to go in and pitch the networks together. Ta-da! Now you have another level of people who are going to give you notes before any of that happens, which I know sounds like a sucky situation. It's not. A lot of times, like some of the best notes that I've gotten have come from my production partners. A lot of the ways that I've really leveled up as a pitcher have been when I've been working with bigger studios. You know, the two that come to mind are Village Roadshow and New Form. Both of those, like every time that I've worked with them, I feel like my game has gotten better by having other people's eyes on them, because these are people who are developing and pitching all the time. And so who are intimately familiar with this entire process. So here's a very important thing that I want you to remember as we're thinking about receiving notes. I want you to treat the pitch as if it's a living organism. It's a thing that's going to be constantly evolving and growing based on the feedback that you get from outside parties and from the pitch experience itself. You never want to view it as a finished product that can never be changed, because that's how you get rigid, and that's how you get to a point where you're like, no, the pitch is great. We're not touching it. I'm perfect and wonderful and a special little darling who's going to sell all of his shows, and don't you dare tell me that anything's wrong with it, right? The pitch is a living thing. It is going to be constantly evolving, both of its own volition and also because you're sitting there going like, I think we can make this a little bit better. I think we can tweak this. So remember that. Treat the pitch as a living organism. Also, I didn't say this up top, but want to make sure if you are watching this live, either on Facebook or on YouTube, leave a comment. If you have a question, I am reading those questions and comments live. I am doing my best to respond to them as we catch them. So if you have a question, if you want to clarify anything, throw it in the comments and we'll talk about it. I want this to be an ongoing conversation between you and I, not just me talking all the time, because I hear enough of my voice as it is. So we're thinking about those production partners, you know, a studio or production house, development company, you know, lots of execs that are coming on as partners with you, and they're going to give you notes. So you can expect that a production partner will want to be able to give at least one round of notes on your pitch and see those revisions executed before they feel comfortable going out to market. So understand that, like, you pitch them and they responded positively, there can be a little bit of an instinct there to be like, well, wait, you guys like the pitch. Why do you want to change anything? Isn't it perfect? Shouldn't we just take it out right now? No, that's not how it works. Like, Just because somebody responds to a pitch and likes it doesn't mean that it's perfect and there's nothing that can be changed or adjusted. So this is also going to depend a lot on your experience level and, you know, really how familiar that studio is with you. Like if you've been working with them time and again and they know that like, oh, you've got this, you might only have one round of notes, and they might even want you to take the lead and tell them how, you know, how many rounds of notes do you want, how, you know, how much do you want to go around this before we start taking it out. But especially if you're further, you know, like if you're a little bit earlier in the process, a little bit less experienced, they're going to want to have their hands on things a little bit more and make sure that their voice is heard, because ultimately they are your partner now. You've made an agreement, so it behooves you to listen to them. So it could be many, many more rounds of revisions depending on how confident they feel about the pitch. Remember that it's almost always in your best interest, or sorry, it's almost always in their best interest to get the pitch out to market as quickly as possible. This is something that we as creators, when we're getting lots of notes, we can kind of forget, because we're like, oh, these dumbass executives, they just want to feel like they're the smartest person in the room and they want to change everything. And it's like, well, here's the thing. They don't really make their money until you sell the show. And so if you're not taking the show out to market, there ain't no way you're selling the show. So it's in your best interest to at least hear the notes and not fight back against all of them, because it's in their best interest to sell the show. And that ultimately, if they're good executives, and look, you partnered with them for a reason, I assume that you respect their opinion, it's in your best interest to at least hear out notes and not shut things down. So that means if they're holding you up with notes, it's not for their own good. It's because they think there's something big that needs fixing. And I've run into this problem before when I've been an executive, and I've been trying to give notes. I've been trying to explain like, hey, this thing is still far away. Like, I believe in the project, but ultimately we've got a lot of work to do. And I've had creators shut me down. And as an exec, there's only so much I can do. I can't write the thing for you. I can't force you to make any changes. So if you're sitting there being like, no, it's fine, we're not doing anything, I've already, you know, my company's already signed a contract with you. We're in this. If you're pushing back and going like, we're not doing any more changes, there's not much that I can do. And that sucks for an exec. When you believe in something and you want to keep pushing it because you know it can be better, and the person on the other end is like, nah, it's good, it can be really difficult. So don't be that person. You know, I have this written here. You know, if they're holding you up with notes, it's not for their own good. It's because there's something big that needs fixing. And then that's something big, if they're holding up the pitch process, that something big is going to be one of the things that keeps you from selling the show. They're trying to impart that to you. So that's a huge, huge thing. I'm like, hey, this is a big thing. This might be the difference between the show selling and not selling. And if you're too excited, for lack of a better term, to get the thing out to market because you think it's perfect, that could ultimately be the difference between you selling and not selling your show. It can be really frustrating when you just want to go and you just want to get in the rooms and see if the thing sells, but you got into business with this people for a reason. We just got a great question in from Antonia. Antonia asks, I pitched to a studio that passed on a project, but I sort of knew why they passed. How long should you wait before you pitch another project to them? Antonia, I love that question. Like, I have lived that experience many times. There's no hard and fast rule here. It really depends on the feedback that you got. I'm actually going to see if, there we go. Hey, I found a new function on on StreamYard here. So the thing is, it really depends on what your relationship is with the studio. If this is your first time going out to them, you may want to give it a beat just to let things breathe so you're not like inundating them with anything. If it's a place that you've pitched to before and you kind of have a good relationship with, and they just happen to pass on this one, I wouldn't have a problem going back to them with something new, you know, after a few weeks. You know, I would say leave enough time so that it feels like there's been a breath. But ultimately, when I was an exec, I had plenty of times where people would come in and pitch me stuff, especially if we had an existing relationship and I knew their work kind of. And I told them, yeah, this really isn't right for us, but, you know, I want you to bring me stuff whenever you have it. If you have that kind of open door, take advantage of it. Like, people don't give you those opportunities lightly. So I would say, feel it out. If it's your first time and they passed, give it a beat. I would say like at least a month before you pitch another project to them. But I wouldn't hold off too long just because they passed on something. In fact, it can be a nice show to those executives that you pitched to before of like, oh, I see what you didn't connect with here. I think I've got something that's a little bit more along the lines of what you're looking for. So let's set up a meeting for that. Hope that answers your question. Let me know in the comments if you if we need to expound on that a little bit, or if you have a follow-up question. But that is a fantastic question. Thank you to Antonia. So we're talking about these pitch partners, about the studios, about the production houses and how to work with them. I'm going to give you guys an example. Back when I was an exec, I had a writing team that pitched me an idea for an animated series, and I had an existing relationship with them. We were friendly. And so ultimately, I was like, I want to find something for us to work on. They pitched me a killer idea that was like, it was super out there, but it was the type of thing that I got really excited about. So we set up a shopping agreement, take the project out together, and it felt like this really perfect partnership, because ultimately they were really talented, but were at a point in their career where they were still inexperienced, didn't have any relationship with networks. And so at the same time, my company and we were on a bit of a hot streak. And so we had a bunch of open doors at a bunch of different networks that wanted to buy from us. And we had one network that was that was super attractive to the writers. We told them about that. We'd had a couple of meetings over there, and they were loving us. And so we told that to our writers, and we were like, I think it could be a good fit there. They got real excited about that. And so we were explaining to them, we had some good meetings over there. We feel like we could connect you guys there. Like, let's work on this together. Let's develop the idea together. Remember, we're talking about development. That is a process. When you enter into a shopping agreement or development deal, it's to develop the show. It doesn't mean that it's a finished product yet. So my writers had this great idea, but the idea itself and the pitch needed a lot of fleshing out, which was like, oh, great. That's what we do. This is a perfect marriage. The only problem was we started going back and forth on notes, and every freaking time it was a battle. It was always like going to a war. They thought that their show and their pitch was ready to go, and myself and the other execs had to explain to them, like, I'm sorry, it's not. Like, we've been through this enough. We have the experience to tell you it's not ready yet. We believe in this. We know it's going to get there, but listen to these notes that we're giving you, apply them, and we're going to get there. And finally, they got to the point where they tried to tell me and my partners, hey, we think it's ready and we think it's going to sell. So why don't we just take it out to the network and see what they say? And we were like, no. I had to then explain to them that they were leveraging my reputation and my company's reputation and relationship at this network. Like, that is something that takes a long time to build up. And that is something that is very valuable. So if we bring them a project that's clearly not ready, it's going to reflect like really poorly on us, So we would end up wasting their time. We waste our time, and we run the risk of undoing all of the goodwill that we had spent years building at this network. So remember, if you're working with a production partner, they want to sell the show too. The show sitting on their shelves does no good to them. That's not how they make money. It doesn't help their bottom line at all to hold up their project with notes. So don't get resentful. Don't get petulant. Focus on getting better and getting the pitch to where it needs to be. Now, think about another group that you might get notes from. It's your friends and colleagues. One of the things I've been preaching is when you're building and you're rehearsing your pitch, share it with as many people as you can so you can get multiple points of feedback. One of the people that we talk about, one of the groups, your friends, the people that you work with in the industry, other writers, other industry contacts that you have, get in front of as many people as you can. I always use the example when I was running my animation studio. Anytime we would have a new pitch, literally everybody at the company would hear that pitch like two at a time. Be like, all right, you guys come in. We want to share the pitch with you. And we would listen to the feedback that everybody would have. Now, that being said, I need you to remember that your friends and your colleagues are not going to be as critical as your partners and your reps. One, because they don't have the same skin in the game. Two, because they want to be nice. And three, because a lot of them probably don't give notes for a living. Even if you're a working writer in the industry, there's a good chance you don't give notes on a regular basis the way a development exec does, who can pinpoint exactly what's working or not working in a pitch. Please don't fall into the trap of thinking, oh, well, my friend said that the pitch was awesome, and my producer said that I need to fix 8 different things. So those opinions are equally valid. I'm going to listen to the positivity and fuck the haters. Like, that is not the way to be thinking. If all the people who already like you told you it was great, and all the people who are invested in the success, who are personally, financially invested, are telling you it still needs work, I would listen to the people who are actually invested in this thing. That is a rookie mistake. Of course, your mom thinks the pitch is great. It's your mom. Pitching to friends, family, and colleagues is great to get the practice and the outside perspectives, but make sure that you are properly weighting that feedback. Antonia, I love this comment. She said, I love receiving notes. It helps me with my writing and pitch deck process. Exactly. The more notes that you can get, the more points of input, like, it helps answer the question of, like, is this good? Is this working? If you can get multiple points of feedback where people are responding to one particular section, you're going to walk into your pitch with so much more confidence. It's a fantastic feeling when you're like, oh, here's the part that everybody gets. Here's the part that everybody laughs at. And you can just sit in that, almost like, here's another baseball analogy of like just a batter sitting there waiting for a fastball right down the middle. You know that it works. You know you're going to crank it out of the park. So you're pitching to friends and colleagues. Utilize that, but make sure that you're weighing their opinion appropriately. Another place that you might get notes, an outside consultant like me. That's part of what I do for a living. I get hired by producers, studios, and networks all the time to come in and look at pitches before they go out to market. And I also work with a lot of creators who hire me directly before they take their pitch out. Obviously, you or your team are the ones paying this person, and you're paying them for a reason. Don't light your money on fire. A consultant is there to give you a complete outsider's perspective and to identify specific things in your pitch that may or may not be working. They are also there to break the groupthink that can take hold when all y'all have spent months just staring at the same thing together and your minds kind of meld. And when a third party comes in and says, oh, this isn't working, and none of y'all had noticed that. So it breaks up that groupthink really well. Also, if you're looking for an outside pitch consultant, hit me up at carlo-moss or moranti.com. Pitch coaching. Yeah. Anyway, outside consultants can be very useful when you're building a pitch. Lastly, the most valuable set of notes you might get are from an interested buyer. These are the types of notes and changes that they want to see executed before they can make a move on your property. This will happen a lot. You go in, you pitch a network, they might have a few tweaks, and before they say yes, they want to make sure that you can execute those tweaks. They might have something similar in development and want you to tweak it in the other direction to make sure that it's really distinct. They might be bumping on one specific element. They might have a specific mandate that they're trying to fill, or they might even just need to make sure that you're not a pain in the ass to work with. Regardless, these are the notes that in all likelihood you have to take. It is the difference between selling and not selling your show. We're going to talk a lot about what are the notes that you can take and what are the notes that you can leave. These are the ones that you have to take, because if you don't, they're going to be like, okay, great. Well, we don't want your show then. So interested buyers, if they are giving you notes or asking for specific changes, listen to those and don't fight back unless you don't want to make your show with them. So now that we've established who's giving you the notes, let's talk about how you take those notes. So how to receive notes. Number one, when you're in a note session, remember that you don't have to respond. Oftentimes, if creators are presented with something that's not working, their first response is to come up with a solution immediately. You don't need to fix it right now. I see this happen all the time in rooms, and it is a rookie mistake. We're not expecting you to come up with a solution immediately as soon as the problem is presented. It is perfectly okay for you to nod your head, go, great, yeah, we'll take a look at that. Write down the note and keep things moving. Too often I see creators trying to play solution whack-a-mole, right? It's, you guys remember the game whack-a-mole where you're like, this one, no, this one, no, this one. And I see, and like, I'll give creators a note and they'll be like, is it this? Is it this? What about this? What if we did this? Does that fix your problem? So the exec presents something that they're bumping up against, and the creator immediately starts throwing out solutions off the top of their head, looking for a fix, looking for me to go, yeah, okay, it's great now. And from an exec standpoint, you can only, like in that position, you can only say no so many times before you throw up your hands and you just want to move on. In most cases, if I'm giving you a note, I want you to go back, think about what's not working there, and then come up with your fix. I don't need you to immediately go, what about this? Huh? Perhaps this. Would this fix work? You don't have to do that. You just sit there, take the note. I'm going to repeat this a few times, but like your standard go-to in a note session should be, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, totally. Be agreeable. Listen. Even if like in your head, you're like, that's fucking bullshit and this person can die. Keep that inside. Oh, all right. Oh yeah, I don't know. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, we can take a look at that. And then you can go back and you can rant and rave, after you've hung up on the Zoom call, which is something that I used to do a lot when I was a writer. I remember when I was a young writer, I had a writing partner, and we had a whole process when we would get notes. I'm embarrassed to share this story, but we're all family here, so we've got an Olive Garden vibe. When I was a young writer, and we would get notes, my partner and I had a process where as soon as we would hang up, I got pretty good at faking the like, oh, okay. As soon as we would hang up, I would throw a freaking temper tantrum, and I would storm around the room and talk about how I would reference punk rock a lot and be like, they don't know what they're talking about. This isn't punk rock. This isn't art. This is blah, 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 and rant and rave. And my writing partner, to his credit, would sit there and he would go, yep, no, you're totally right. Fuck them. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. That being said, if we did take the note, what would we do? And I'd sit there and be stewing in my anger. I'd be like, I don't know. Well, I mean, we do this, this, and this, and I mean, and that would address the note. And then we would sit there and look at each other and be like, oh yeah, I guess we can't just do that. But that was our process. Was I would throw my little temper tantrum, and this was before I had spent time working as an exec and kind of saw both sides of the table. And then when we go, all right, well, if we were to fix it, then we would just do this, this, and this, and I guess this isn't the hill to die on, so we'll just go ahead and fix it. That was our process. The next thing I want you to remember, notes are not gospel. Take the ones that work for you, leave the ones that don't. As an exec, I can tell you from experience, I never delivered notes expecting that my writer would take all of them. That kind of comes with the territory. If I'm going to lay out everything that I'm bumping against, I want you to take the things that you connect with and ultimately execute them. If you want to take all of them, great, but that's not my expectation. However, if you are getting the same note over and over again, either from different people or from the same person, pay attention. Because as an exec, if I'm hitting you on the same thing over and over again and you're not changing it, it's because I think that it's really important and needs to be changed. And that, that's something like I don't necessarily have a problem with confrontation in a notes call. So if it's gone 3 times and they still haven't changed the thing, I don't have a problem calling the writer out and saying like, look, I've been hitting this point. Like, I really think you need to change this. It's not working. So just sitting in that and recognizing like, ooh. I love this comment from Antonia. She says, I got a great note from a showrunner that helped change the trajectory of the story, making it much better. That's a huge thing to remember, y'all. Like, a lot of these people are good at what they do. Not every exec got their job by failing upwards. In fact, in my experience, most of the time I've gotten notes from execs, from showrunners, like, they're pretty good. And you can suss out the bad ones. It's like, you grow that skill of being able to identify like, oh yeah, that note makes sense. Here's how I can apply it. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but one of the best examples of like a network note, we always think of network notes in this like gross kind of way of like, oh God, they're just trying to put their, get their fingers into my artistic pie. They're trying to mess with it. Elaine on Seinfeld was a network note. And that was part of what made the show work so well, was they said, you need to have a woman in this. that came from the network. And from the stories that I've read, Jerry and Larry were not a big fan of that idea, but they took the note, they went, all right, and ultimately it made the show what it was. There's so many examples of network notes, exec notes actually helping a show. So let that be what happens to your show. You get a note and you turn it into something great. At the same time, notes are not gospel. Take what works for you, leave the rest. Here's a very specific element of note taking: where to take your notes. So if you know that you're gonna be getting notes on a call, by the way, this is like a fucking pet peeve of mine. All right, if you know you're gonna be getting notes on a call, either notes about a pitch or notes about a script, take the call somewhere where you can write down the notes. Even if there's an assistant who's taking all the minutes and is going to be sending it to you afterwards, be somewhere where you can write down the notes, and you can write down any notes to yourself that particularly stand out. And be attentive. One of the most frustrating and insulting things that happens all the time as an exec is when creators take notes calls in the car or outside. It tells me you didn't even care enough to make time for this call, and you're not going to retain large chunks of what I tell you. Because I, as an exec, I dig in, I get deep with my notes. I'm going to have a long list, especially if I respect you as a creator. If I respect you as a creator, I know that I can throw a bunch of things at you and go, here's what we need to work on. I trust that you'll be able to knock these out. And if you're in the middle of driving, or you're outside, you're on a walk, you're at the beach or whatever, you're not going to, and you're just like, oh no, I'll listen and I'll pick up what you're saying. You're not going to be able to keep up with everything that I'm throwing at you. And so it's going to be a waste of all of our times. I get really granular and specific with some of my notes that usually fills up multiple pages of both positive and negative feedback. And if you're in your car, there's no way you're retaining all of what I'm telling you. So make sure that you take notes in a place where you can actually take notes. Next point about notes: don't get defensive. The worst thing that you can do on a notes call is to get defensive and start arguing with the person giving the note that they're wrong. Remember, they're on your team and they don't get any benefit from tearing you down. They need you in order to succeed. Sure, they might be wrong. I'm not, by no means am I saying every note is good and you should take all of them. No, there were a ton of notes that you'll get that you should not take and that won't work. But remember, they're not gospel. If you don't agree, you can just take a beat, write it down, and then not execute it. You don't have to sit there and tell them why they're wrong. If you don't agree, you don't have to fire back. You can sit there and write it down and then evaluate it. Sometimes you will just get a shitty note from a shitty exec who doesn't know your show well enough. That's happened all the time to me. The cliche of the junior executive who's just giving a note in a room to justify their existence and their salary. That person does exist, but it's way less prevalent than we writers like to think it is. We like to think that every exec is just sitting there being I have to say something, so here's my note. The thing is that's way less prevalent than we think it is. In those cases, just remember, you don't have to take every note. Nod your head and keep it moving. Or look for the note behind the note. Oftentimes, when you get a note that seems out of left field, it's because there's actually something deeper that the note giver is missing, and they might not be able to articulate it. I've had a few experiences where I hear a note on its surface, and I'm like, this person is dumb. They don't get the show. They don't understand how to pitch. They don't know what they're talking about. And I sat down and I looked at it and I went, the solution that they gave and even the problem that they presented is incorrect. However, what they are there is something deeper underneath what they said that they're bumping against that is actually 100% valid and that I need to adjust and improve. If you're bumping on a note, do some detective work. Is there an underlying part of the character that needs to be addressed? And that's why there's a note on the line that they said. By that same token, sometimes execs will give a note and not realize that changing that one thing will actually pull a thread that collapses 5 different elements of the pitch that you've woven together really tightly. It's okay to just not take that note. I've had that happen plenty of times where a well-meaning exec will point something out and be like, ooh, maybe we can cut this section here. And they don't realize like, oh, well, actually there's a piece of that section that sets up the next 3 sections that we harken back to. And we're basically gonna have to rework the whole pitch. So I'm just gonna go ahead and leave that in. All right. My next note, feel free to yes and. We talked about not fighting back and not arguing and not necessarily providing fixes immediately. The flip side of that is that you can yes and. We talked a little bit about not playing that solution whack-a-mole game. The positive flip side is that you can yes and make it a collaborative process. So sometimes when I'm the writer who's getting notes, an exec will give me a note, and that'll spark an idea in me that I want to share. So now sometimes it's best to just hold on to that idea until you're back kind of with the work in front of you, reworking the pitch. You can properly beat out all the elements of that idea. So you might want to just hang on to it, keep it there. Other times, though, you can't help but share. And in those cases, feel free to do so. But remember to frame it in the most positive, collaborative light. Like I like to frame it as, oh, that makes me think of this, or oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Maybe we can do this, this, and this. It's not a fix. It's a yes and. I'm not asking you if I got the right answer. I'm working with you and letting your creativity spark my creativity. That's a huge, huge difference where it feels like we're working together. And then that exec on the other side doesn't feel like a school teacher telling you like, no, this is wrong. And you being like, is this right? Is this the correct answer? Instead, they feel like they're part of the creative process with you. And you guys are ultimately collaborating on something together. And you get to give them some good feelings just by being like, you know what? That made me think of this. So yes, and it always goes back to improv. Last thing about notes, don't bullshit. If you get a question on notes and you don't know the answer, just say so. And then tell them, you know what? We'll go back and take a look at that. I actually hadn't thought of that. That's a valid answer for any negative feedback you get in here. We'll go back, take a look, and see what we can do there. That's all that you have to say. You don't have to bullshit or try to justify why you did something. Just own it and go, oh, you know what? That works a lot better. We didn't think of that. We'll go back and take a look at it. So be humble in your note taking. Don't bullshit. Don't fight back. Don't get defensive and argumentative. Just like it is one of the best skill sets that you can develop. I can say this as somebody who has walked through the path of going from being an asshole note taker to somebody who genuinely enjoys the note process and has been on both sides of the table. When you're good at receiving notes, oh my God, it is a dream for everyone that works with you. So with that in mind, let's talk about adjustments, when to make them and when not to. So as we discussed earlier, your pitch is a living, breathing thing. It's going to be constantly changing and evolving thanks to lots and lots of feedback, as well as the way that you grow and relate to the pitch personally. So we never want to view the pitch as a finished product. We can always adjust and tweak so that we're always coming into the pitch room confident that we are presenting the absolute best version of this product. Now, that being said, it is very important for a great pitcher to know that there is a time and place for adjustments and a specific time and place for different types of adjustments. Not all adjustments are created equal. Being a constant tinkerer can be just as detrimental to a pitch as being overconfident and never changing anything. So let's first talk about early stages. Recognize that at the early stages of your pitch, a lot is going to change. There is nothing in concrete. Make peace with that fact. For me, when I start working on a pitch, I always let my partners know what my process looks like. Especially, if I'm working with a new studio or something, I let them in on the fact that like, hey, I write really fat pitches. Our first notes call, you're going to be real worried. My first drafts are always huge because I like to get the thing up on its feet, stumble through it, and see what people connect with. I mean, I've gone into pitch production companies and I've gone into pitch production companies and partners with pitches that are like 35 or 40 minutes long, specifically to see what's working. The thing is, I make sure that I warn them ahead of time that that's what they're in for. But it's all in service of identifying like, oh, this works, this doesn't work. It can be really overwhelming for people who haven't worked with me before, but I always assure them, don't worry, this is normal for me. This is how I work. Understand though, my process might not be your process, and this approach probably won't work for most people. The important thing that I want you to take away though is that in the early stages of your pitch, go in with the mindset that you're looking for feedback. You want to see what works and what doesn't so that you can give this thing some shape. Don't be afraid of failure. In fact, actively look for failure. Look for things that aren't working so that you can adjust them. Allow room for notes. Go in with the mindset of a detective trying to find clues as to what the best version of the pitch is. Don't be afraid to fail. And at this early stage, focus on the big overarching notes. There will be time to address the nitty-gritty of language and specifics, but be prepared to get notes on things that aren't important yet and put those in your pocket and be like, that's not what we're focused on yet. We want to get the big things done first. We're building something here. We want to get the scaffolding up first. We want to build the foundation first. Then once the framework of your pitch is set up and you have a good sense of like what your sections are, who's saying what, and where you're going, you can focus on going deeper on the content. What stories are you telling? How are you saying it? Are the character sections focused on relationships and personality, or are they more focused on the backstory? Which episodes are we going to use as our samples? Let's beat those out and make sure all the story beats work. How are the plot points in the pilot flowing together? These are all things that you should be asking yourself in kind of those middle stages of the pitch build. This is the point at which you're going to really start scripting yourself and building out the meat of your pitch. That means you're going to be doing a lot of tweaking on your bullet points and what you want the focus of each section to be. This is also the place where you can start to solidify all your visual materials that are going to support your pitch. So, all right, now you're out of the middle section. You got your pitch. You've run it a bunch of times. It's right around that like 18 to 20 minute mark. You're probably a few weeks out from your network pitches. Here's a time to get nitty gritty. Focus on your details. Is this the best way to word things? Is there a tweak to make this joke 15% better? Is there a slightly better punchline? What if we say it like this instead of like this? Play around with all different types of things to make sure that you are presenting the best possible version of your pitch. The thing is, you want to make these adjustments with enough time so that you get used to the slight changes in your rhythm and the flow of the pitch. Is there any place in the pitch where I'm being too redundant? Can I condense 2 sentences into one? This is the moment for your fine-toothed comb. All right? Then we get to right before the pitch. Once you get to the actual week and days of the pitch, it is time to throw away your fine-tooth comb and trust that you've done the work. It might feel a little bit counterintuitive, right? So you're going in really confident and you're like, oh, let's just tweak here, let's tweak there. Everything's working. I just want to make it the best. That time has passed. When you're in pitch mode, it is time to get confident. Build up your confidence. Trust yourself that you've done the work. Throw away the fine-tooth comb. You've been putting in the time, and at this point, trying to over-tinker is actually going to do more harm than good. I've seen this happen in pitches where people try to reword something like 5 minutes before your pitch, and it throws you off of your rhythm. And ultimately, those tiny tinkers, they're not going to make any difference between whether this show will sell or not. At this point, the only adjustments you should be making, again, we're talking about the days, maybe the day of the pitch or the week of the pitch. At this point, the only adjustments that you need to be making are the ones that are going to be the difference between a no and a yes. I see this mistake happen all the time with creators because ultimately you want to believe that the difference between a no and a yes is completely within your control and is all dependent on if you can turn the right knobs and dials to just the right angle. You're like, oh, let me tweak this. Oh, if I tweak this, if I tweak this, then I'm in control of whether the show sells or not. But honestly, a lot of whether your pitch sells is based on factors outside of your control. Your job is to go in there, take care of everything that you can control, and trust that the rest is going to take care of itself. You do the work, and then you can trust. That's why at the beginning of this class, I recommended for all of you to check out that book, The Inner Game of Tennis. If you haven't checked it out, now is a great time to go find it. All right. The biggest thing I want for you, when you're thinking about the week and the day of the pitch, number one thing I want you walking in there with confidence that you did the work, confidence that this idea is as good as you think it is, and confidence that you are going to sell the show. I cannot emphasize enough how important confidence is to pitches. It comes through in every aspect of the pitch. And so that's why I don't want you messing with the little things that don't make a difference. It's going to erode your confidence. Like with all my creators, I send them an email the morning of our first pitch, reminding them of how talented they are, how much work they put in, and how awesome they're going to be. Like I need them going in with the full confidence in themselves and their product. And if I'm giving them little granular notes right up to the last minute, it erodes that confidence. It tells me like, I don't know if you guys are going to sell this show. Let's keep messing with this. Let's keep messing with this. I don't believe in you. On the day of the pitch, I want you to envision that famous line from the OC, confidence, Cohen, confidence. And then the final time that you might need to make adjustments is in the course of your pitch tour, right? Most times when you're pitching, you're going around to different networks over the course of a couple of weeks. And if you're getting passes from some of the early networks and they keep saying the same thing, you keep getting the same feedback that they're bumping on, that's the time to adjust midstream. All right. It can be a tough task to adjust the thing that you've been working on so long, but it can be vitally important. And that's also part of the reason why a lot of execs, agents, managers, reps, people who set up pitch tours, who are going to book all of your meetings, tend to put ones up front that are a little bit more of the long shots so that you can get a little bit of feedback and also so that you can get kind of like the nerves out. So the ones that are the best fit are ultimately the ones where you have everything just humming, right? So if you're getting passes from networks and they keep saying the same thing, that's the time you want to adjust midstream. You may also be finding that the joke that killed in rehearsals just will not land in an actual pitch. It happens. You know, you're in there like every time that you hit this joke, it kills. And then you start getting into pitches, nothing. It's okay to cut it, but be wary of reading too much into a network passing and then trying to completely rework the pitch. For months, you've been getting all these pieces of positive feedback. You've been growing the thing. And then one person says no, maybe without even any feedback. And all of a sudden you want to blow the whole thing up. It's hard. You have to learn how to accept rejection. That's going to be what we're focusing on next week, right? You might have had a great pitch. You might have made a great impression. And the network might have just passed because it's not the right fit. Your show isn't what they're looking for right now. You can't control that. There's nothing in your control that you can do to change that no into a yes. So you can just go, oh, all right, cool. Let's keep it moving. Any number of reasons outside of your control can lead to a pass. Now, when you get a pass, try to get as much feedback as you can. You know, you can reach out to your agent, your manager, or the production company you're working with, whoever is the direct contact between you and the network. See if you can get some feedback, and that might help you figure out what you need to rework. But be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is where it pays to have really competent, honest partners who can help you address things that, for whatever reason, aren't working. Too often, we taste a little bit of rejection, and we feel like that means that we need to throw everything out. We taste that rejection, we're like, I knew it, I suck. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I would rather err on the side of being too confident in a good pitch that I've worked on for months versus erring on the side of panicking in the face of rejection and limited feedback, which will lead us to our main topic for next week, how to handle rejection. So all of that, we've talked about notes. We've talked about adjustments. We're right up against the hour, but let's review really quick. Ultimately, we're looking at these things with notes. When you're receiving notes, who's giving you notes? It's reps, production partners, friends and colleagues, outside consultants, and the most important, interested buyers. When you're receiving your notes, remember these things. You don't need to fix it right now. Notes are not gospel. Don't take a fucking notes call in your car. Don't get defensive. Look for the note behind the note. Feel free to yes and don't bullshit. When you think about adjustments, remember that there's a time and place for each one. The early stages are for the big structural changes where you're building your foundation. As you're going deeper, you want to start getting in, start really working with the content, figuring out everything that needs to be done. And then towards the end, get into the nitty gritty where you can play around with your language, really get that pitch humming. And right before the pitch, throw out the fine tooth comb, get confident. And then if you need to start making adjustments midstream, remember that there are many factors out of your control. Don't throw the entire pitch out just because one person said no, especially if you don't have a large amount of feedback. So that is our class. We are right up at the hour. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Carlo Gonzalez-Moss. If you're interested in working with me, like I said, I do pitch coaching. I build pitch decks, lookbooks, all that good stuff. You can hit me up anywhere on social media at Carlo Moss, or you can check out my company, Moranti Media, everything for the pitch. That is our tagline. That is our specialty. Reach out to us. We have a contact form where you can email me direct if you have any questions that pop up or if you're interested in working together. Outside of that, if you are watching this on demand, please leave a comment wherever you're watching it, whether on Facebook or YouTube. If you have a question, a comment, any kind of feedback, check it out. Like, go ahead and leave something. I always make sure to check all of our streaming platforms before each class so that if any questions popped up, I can respond to those. So this is always a conversation, whether you're watching me right now in the moment or you're watching me sometime in the future. All right. Thank you all so much for joining me. I will see you here next week. Take care. Now go sell a show.